The part of Paul Kersey in Death Wish was a natural match for Charles Bronson, who is famous for his imposing presence and strong body, and is almost a byword for action movies. This was a turning point in his career that would last for almost 30 years and lead him to unprecedented success.
Have you been battered up then? I mean, do you actually bear any physical wounds?
A few, yeah, it's right here, that wound. And I have many others, of course.
Even though he has received widespread praise for his performance, Bronson continues to shroud his personal life in mystery. Now, 20 years after his death, his children are bringing to light long-suppressed facts. Charles Bronson kept many secrets, and you should not miss your chance to learn them all. Charles Bronson, the legendary tough guy of Hollywood, had actual worries and anxieties that ran counter to his on-screen image, including a preoccupation with little details. Despite his courageous depiction of tough people on screen, Bronson suffered from real concerns, most notably an enduring terror of germs. The fact that Bronson shied away from physical touch, particularly with his admirers, was an oddity in his life. Bronson broke with convention by refusing to shake hands with any of his devoted followers. Some thought Bronson was being distant or starry-eyed, but it was really just his severe phobia of germs. Although it may seem like a harmless social act, he avoided handshakes because he thought they may harbor hidden diseases. One aspect of Bronson's illogical fears was this dread of germs. He also suffered from a severe aversion to fire. While shooting 1974's Death Wish, this anxiety became glaringly obvious. The rumor mill has it that Bronson flat-out refused to stay in any of the hotel rooms on levels higher than 2 when the film team was there. Bronson was afraid that he and his family would be trapped on a higher level if a fire broke out, which is why he made this strange decision. The public's perception of Bronson became more nuanced due to this apparently contradictory vulnerability. In spite of his portrayal of unrelenting hardness both on and off screen, he battled worries that others may dismiss as unfounded or insignificant. Unlike the macho roles he played, it made him more relatable. The stage name that Charles Bronson employed was an alias. He spent a considerable amount of time, especially in his early Hollywood career, going by his birth name, Charles Dennis Bukinski. Early in his acting career, he was most known for his roles as Charles Dennis Bukinski. A turning point in his career, nevertheless, occurred when he chose the legendary stage name Charles Bronson, a name that would reverberate throughout cinematic eras. Bruce Bronson's close friend and fellow actor Steve McQueen proposed the alteration, which sparked it. Knowing how important it is to have a distinctive and memorable screen name, McQueen thought Bronson would be perfect. The entertainment business, and Hollywood in particular, was struggling under the weight of McCarthyism when this suggestion emerged. Charles was aware of the difficulties presented by the fact that his last name sounded Lithuanian in a community where anti-communist feelings were strong. He had a difficult time breaking into jobs and climbing the corporate ladder since his name was unintentionally linked to communism. Charles considered changing his last name for a variety of reasons, including career advancement and navigating the political atmosphere of his day. The moment of truth occurred on a whim while hanging out with Steve McQueen. In the course of their enjoyable journey, McQueen saw a street sign that said Bronson. Realizing the name's potential in film, he immediately proposed it to Charles. After hearing McQueen's advice, Charles Dennis Bukinski changed his name to Charles Bronson and never looked back. Not only did Charles and his family decide to alter their names, but so did others. Even his father, Valterus P. Bukinski, had changed his name to Walter Bukinski so he would sound more American. A desire for assimilation and an understanding of the social and cultural dynamics of the time are both reflected in this Americanization of family names. He started smoking when he was 9 years old. An emotional new dimension to the life story of Charles Bronson, a major player in Hollywood in the 1950s, is the discovery that he started smoking when he was only 9 years old. The disturbing fact that Bronson began smoking at a young age sheds light on a depressing part of his troubled childhood at a time when the practice was almost universal among famous performers. There is no clear evidence on the cause of Bronson's early smoking habit. Therefore, his introduction to the habit is still a mystery. The brutal reality of his poor background, however, may have had a significant impact, according to experts. Although Bronson was the 11th kid out of 15 siblings, his family had a very hard time making ends meet. A striking indicator of the family's economic struggles was the fact that he had to wear his sister's clothing to school on occasion due to the severe financial conditions. Bronson joined his father in the harsh coal mine environment when he was 10 years old, ending his academic career at an early age. Working conditions in the coal mines were deplorable, and the hours of hard work were relentless. With a demanding work and the harsh reality of poverty looming over him, Bronson resorted to smoking as a means to cope. Cigarette smoking may have provided him with a means of coping, an escape from the brutality of his environment, and a measure of sanity in the face of his hardships. The vice that may have helped Bronson cope in his youth ended up becoming his downfall. Finally, his health was devastated by his lifetime involvement with smoking, which led to metastatic lung cancer and his death. This moving arc highlights the connection between Bronson's difficult childhood, the coping strategies he used, and the unforeseen effects that occurred throughout his life. Charles Bronson's heroic and courageous rise from the coal mines to the front lines of WWII is a tribute to his enlistment in the United States Army Air Forces during that war. When Bronson entered in the U.S. Army Air Forces at the age of 22, his life took a drastic change after toiling in the coal mines for over 12 years. He served his nation well by being a witness to momentous events during World War II. Bronson showed his abilities and commitment quickly while serving with the 76th Gunnery Training Squadron. He was promoted to the important position of aerial gunner aboard one of the most famous aircraft of the war, the Boeing B-29 Superfortress, in 1945. Bronson was a member of the 60th Bombardment Squadron, which put him in the thick of the action in the Pacific Theater, where he engaged the Japanese in dangerous and fierce aerial combat. During his time in the military, he took part in an incredible 25 missions, all of which were full with risk and uncertainty. Bronson was cognizant of the cost of war. The fact that he sustained so many wounds while doing his job is evidence of how brutal battle can be. The Purple Heart, a symbol of bravery and sacrifice, was justly bestowed to Bronson for his valor and selflessness, resilience, perseverance, and honesty when challenged. The mental and physical toll that Bronson bore throughout his time in the military was reflected by the Purple Heart, which is given to those who were injured or died in battle. It was a concrete way to show how much his efforts and sacrifices meant to the war effort and to his nation. During his difficult times, he lived with Jack Klugman. Beyond their renowned performances in Death Wish and The Odd Couple, Charles Bronson and Jack Klugman have a bond that goes beyond either film. Both performers had a special connection as struggling artists in post-WWII New York City long before their respective careers took off. Charles Bronson traveled to the vibrant metropolis of New York after WWII ended in pursuit of acting chances. During their early years of their careers, Bronson and Jack Klugman happened to share an apartment while they pursued their aspirations. Not only did they have each other financially, but they also formed a bond as they battled for success in the cutthroat entertainment industry. After Charles Bronson and Harriet Tendler, his first wife, agreed to tie the knot, their living condition altered. After getting married, Bronson decided to move out of the flat he had lived with Klugman since he was taking on new obligations and opening new chapters in his life. The friendship that the two performers formed as housemates will remain with them long after their departure. In a far later interview, Jack Klugman recalled Charles Bronson with fondness, saying that Bronson was an excellent roommate and, to his surprise, a very competent ironer. This tale provides insight into the commonalities of friendship that characterized their early trials. Their common background is given a touch of comedy and empathy by showing Bronson, who is renowned for his tough guy character on cinema, demonstrating his ironing talents. He became a major player in European cinema and rose to fame. Charles Bronson's rise to fame throughout the world is reflective of a story about a successful career that began in Europe and a delayed acknowledgement in America. He was a little celebrity in the United States, but he became a huge success in Europe after landing supporting parts there. Addio L'ami, Farewell Friend, released in 1968, was Bronson's first picture set in Europe. Even though he was becoming more famous in America, he was still mostly cast in supporting parts back then. When the producer explained a key difference between the European film business and the American one, namely that the former placed more emphasis on character depth and less on physical appearance, Bronson's initial reluctance to accept the European project transformed into acceptance. A turning point in his career came when Bronson acted on this realization and took advantage of the chance. With the huge success of Addio L'ami, Bronson was able to work with Sergio Leone, the great director of Once Upon a Time in the West, on the memorable picture. After seeing Bronson perform, Leone was so thrilled that he named him one of the best actors he had ever collaborated with. After its 1968 debut, Bronson was even more established as a genuine superstar on the global cinema scene. With the critically acclaimed and Golden Globe-winning 1970 picture Rider on the Rain, Bronson maintained his European triumph. The actor's ability to connect with people all across the world, regardless of their cultural background, is seen in his sustained acclaim. Emotional scars from his early years persist to this day. More than merely a stage performance, Charles Bronson's monosyllabic voice, stoicism, and rough exterior were born out of the struggles he had in his youth. The extreme poverty Bronson experienced as a youngster left an everlasting mark on his personality, which was characterized as reticent and reclusive. The very private Bronson was detailed in a 1973 newspaper feature. It was difficult for the actor, who usually plays a rough guy, to watch his own films or participate in interviews. A lifelong introvert, his dislike of promoting himself was an outward sign of his intrinsic introversion. In a 1974 profile, film critic Roger Ebert explored Charles Bronson's mysterious nature in more detail. The way Bronson carried himself in real life was quite similar to the roles he played in films, as pointed out by Ebert. While speaking with Ebert, Bronson said that he preferred entertaining himself over having lengthy conversations with other people. This preference for contemplation over outspoken speech came to characterize him. Even though Bronson had indisputable talent and made significant contributions to the film industry, critics and observers believed that the United States had failed to recognize his full potential, which may have contributed to his reserved and reticent personality. Some speculated that Bronson's alienation from the public eye stemmed from his feelings of being underappreciated or ignored. The difficulties that Bronson endured as a youngster, from a difficult upbringing to the late discovery of his abilities, formed the bedrock of his guarded and reclusive personality. The man behind the personas remained mysterious, a complicated mix of contemplation and restrained emotion, even if his on-screen performances were strong and often represented uncompromising hardness. The director's first choice for Death Wish wasn't Bronson. Charles Bronson's career peaked when he played the part that would define his Hollywood legacy, an iconic character, at the age of 52. Death Wish director Michael Winner gave Bronson the starring part, and it was the turning point. Bronson became a cultural sensation thanks to this picture, which thrust him into the spotlight. Death Wish starred Bronson as Paul Kersey, an architect from New York whose life takes a sad turn after the savage assault that kills his wife. In his pursuit of vengeance and justice, Kersey becomes a vigilante. Global audiences were deeply moved by the film, which was based on the eponymous book by Brian Garfield. Fascinatingly, Charles Bronson wasn't the director's first pick for the part, despite the film's subsequent popularity. Henry Fonda turned down Michael Winner's invitation to play the lead role after reading the screenplay and finding it disgusting. Because of this surprising development, Bronson was able to play the role of Paul Kersey. Bronson had an instant affinity to the character and the subject matter as soon as he read the screenplay. He eagerly and quickly accepted the task. He had no idea that this choice would have such a profound impact on the film industry and the sad tale of his career. The $22 million that Death Wish made was nothing short of phenomenal. Beyond the box office, the picture solidified Charles Bronson's status as a legitimate action star. Beyond the original film, Death Wish became an enduring hit, inspiring 4 further films in which Bronson played the revenge vigilante. Both the cultural variety of Charles Bronson's family and his own will to succeed in spite of language obstacles are on display throughout his linguistic journey. The Binsky family spoke Lithuanian rather than English, as both parents were from the south of Lithuania. The peculiar cultural milieu that the family lived in, where Lithuanian was still the dominant language, was put in motion by their linguistic heritage. Interestingly, Bronson's school reflected the bilingual environment in which he grew up. Language was not an issue for Bronson when he was a young student in a neighborhood where many of his peers, including those of Lithuanian heritage, could not speak English. Lithuanian became a unifying language for the pupils because of their shared linguistic heritage. But when Bronson started studying languages on his own, his journey took a unique turn. Bronson made it his personal mission to become fluent in English, even though he did not face any language barriers in his early schooling. His strong accent, which he acquired via self-study, would cause friction in the Air Force and other settings where he served. Many of Bronson's fellow Air Force members misunderstood him due to his strong accent. His other troops often misunderstood his accent, thinking he was from another nation completely. This misunderstanding, which stemmed from his unique speech pattern, further complicated Bronson's time in the military. Charles Bronson's intellectual excellence was on full display, despite his language difficulties. He overcame the challenges of growing up in a non-English-speaking home to become an accomplished student. His achievement of being the first of his Binsky siblings to complete high school is evidence of his brilliance and dedication to learning. Bronson could speak more than just English and Lithuanian. His extensive cultural and linguistic background was further enhanced by his fluency in Russian and Greek, in addition to his home languages. Charles Bronson's personal life was closely linked to his long-lasting love for Jill Ireland, a bond that endured the ups and downs of Hollywood and life in general. When Bronson and Jill first met paths in 1962, she was married to actor David McCallum, and their adventure started. The story goes that Bronson told McCallum he would marry Jill after meeting her. On October 5, 1968, when Charles Bronson and Jill Ireland exchanged vows, commencing a marriage that would last until Jill's death in 1990, this prophecy would truly come true. As they brought up their 7 children, the couple settled into a beautiful Bel Air estate in Los Angeles. Charles Bronson and Jill Ireland had an unbreakable friendship that permeated their work lives as well as their personal ones. For Bronson, who was famous for his tough guy parts, casting Jill as his starring woman was an unusual need for many of his productions. The fact that the pair wanted to convey their personal and professional lives via their creative partnership is evident in the 15 films they starred in together. In his role as a family man, Bronson spared no effort to protect his family. As a family unit, they were able to weather the storms of his Hollywood career because he often brought Jill and their children along on his trips. In addition to their home in Los Angeles, the couple had a Vermont farmhouse called Zula Farm. The name was chosen to honor their only daughter, further emphasizing the property's family value. In the late 80s and early 90s, Bronson and his family spent a lot of time in Snowmass, Colorado, to get away from the hectic pace of Hollywood. During his time away to Snowmass, Bronson was able to appreciate the peaceful side of life, apart from the hectic pace of the entertainment world. Charles Bronson's Secret Truths. What are your thoughts on them? Feel free to share your thoughts in the space provided. We hope that this video has been of use to you. If you like it, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with your friends. Until our next video, I appreciate you taking the time to watch.